Hey, I'm Jessie David of Metal Wani, and joining me today is Tom G. Warrior, formerly of Hellhammer and Celtic Frost, and currently of Triumph of Death and Triptykon. How's it going today?
Very good. A bit tired, but very good.
I'm finding more people are just kind of hitting that brick wall. How are you dealing with COVID-19 so far?
Well, COVID-19 is a minor thing. It really means nothing compared to every journalist in the world asking me during every single interview that I'm doing, how am I coping with COVID-19? And given that I'm promoting a major album, I've heard this maybe 1,628,000 times, and that makes me more ill than COVID will ever be able to.
Well, you know what? The hell with it. Let's move forward and talk about this release of the new album. You are gearing up the release, Requiem, live at Roadburn 2019. Tell me about the release and how long have you had the idea?
Well, I've had the idea since summer 1986, basically. And the release symbolizes the conclusion of this decades-long project. Of course, Martin Arcane and I in Celtic Frost in 1986, we thought we would finish this Requiem maybe within 2 or 3 years. And at the age we had back then in our early 20s, very early 20s, we could have never imagined what over 3 decades means and that it would take so long. But now it's finally finished, and tomorrow it should be released, and I'm very glad that's behind me.
You say you're glad it's behind you. Why is that?
Because it was quite a burden. I wasn't really in the frame of mind at all to I wanted to finish the Requiem for all this time, and when I reformed Celtic Frost with Martin Ain in the early 2000s, one of the first things we talked about was finishing the Requiem. That's why we recorded yet another installment of it on a Monotheist album. And then Celtic Frost fell apart once again, and I knew I was going to finish the Requiem with Triptykon one day. But it's a major project, and you need to be in the frame of mind. And I thought I'm going to do it in the 3rd or 4th studio album of Triptykon in my own time, in my own leisurely way. But then Roadburn Festival contacted us and gave us this tremendous opportunity to collaborate with them. And Roadburn being longtime friends of ours, and also being the festival that's perfect for such a venture. And given us resources that were absolutely lavish, we had to say yes. There was no way I could have turned this down. But I wasn't in the frame of mind at all to write a Requiem or to finish the Requiem. And I knew it was a major project. It wasn't just like writing a metal song. I knew it was a huge mountain to climb. And I had to sit down and do it, and it took 2 years. For the first year was writing, arranging, rehearsing, and performing the piece, and then the second year was listening to all the recordings, the uncounted tracks that we recorded with the orchestra, and then cleaning them and mixing it, working on the concert, working on the artwork with the record company. While I was writing the Requiem, the woman I was in a relationship with decided to see somebody else, and so on. The whole thing was a curse, and I'm infinitely glad if I never ever have to deal with this album again my entire life. The whole, from start to finish, it was a curse.
Curious about the layout as well, because you released Part 3 Winter before you released Part 2, which we now know is Grave Eternal. Why is that?
Why not? The thing is, if it's not finished, it doesn't really matter which part you listen to.
Yeah.
It's important that the finished Requiem is played in the correct order. But before it was finished, we simply released the parts by intuition. We felt that when I play Martin the demos I have when we worked on Monotheist, we both felt Winter would fit perfectly on this album. So we said, let's do it. It's no big deal. It was a song that fit perfectly as far as the atmosphere and the tone was concerned. So we put it on there.
I thought the orchestra was really interesting. It sounded very powerful. What was it like playing with the full orchestra?
Well, it's a somewhat intimidating experience, of course, because they are all studied. They all went to study music, and I, of course, never did. I studied to be a mechanic originally, and everything I play I taught myself. And you're there with like 30 people who have degrees in music, and everybody looks at you because you're the songwriter, and everybody expects you to have the perfect solution for everything. And of course, I have the pride to deliver this solution, but that for somebody like me who's self-taught, that again, it's a huge mountain to climb, and there was a lot of pressure on my shoulders. I don't think I've ever gone on stage so focused before in my life. I was very, very concentrated. You have a lot of information in front of you. You have a lot of information in your head. You have a lot of information on the headphones, and then there's the conductor and all these musicians, and you know exactly if one of us all makes a major mistake, it's going to ruin the entire piece, because everything live, it's being premiered live. And there was no room, unlike a normal metal concert where you can occasionally play a wrong note and you can save it. There was absolutely no way. And it was filmed, it was recorded, and so on. So it was a tremendous amount of pressure. And it was a very relaxing feeling to actually see it concluded the last few seconds and know, well, it worked.
It sure as hell did, and it sounds amazing. Is it something that you would do again in the future?
Hopefully not. No, and I'm, as I said, I perceive it as a curse, and I'm very glad to move away from it. I've done it now, and I had to do it. I also owed it to Martin, and I did it in his memory as good as I could, very sincerely. But I'm also glad to step away from it. It occupied this final part alone occupied 2 years of my life, and the whole thing, like we said in the beginning, was over 3 decades. It's also good to step away from something like that and to have it concluded, and let's let it rest the rest of my life.
Well, we're excited about the release date for tomorrow. I also read that you recorded 2 days of rehearsal and sound check. Will you be releasing those as well?
No, we just did this in case something would go majorly wrong during the performance. We wanted to have some kind of safety net, because we knew it's a unique performance. It will very likely not be repeated because it's very complex financially and logistically.
Yeah.
For a band of our size, we're not Bon Jovi who can afford this every day. This was a very special project, so we wanted to record it, and we wanted to have some backups. And the rehearsals went very, very well, and the rehearsal studio was fully equipped for professional recording. So we recorded that to have some additional material. As it turned out, we didn't need this, but there was one take of the last part, Winter, a rehearsal take, and that came out so beautifully that we decided to use this as a bonus track. And that sounds, of course, ludicrous given that it's a classical piece, but the last part of the Requiem is featured on some of the edition as a bonus track, because it was just a very beautiful take.
Amazing. Moving forward, how's the new Triptykon album coming along?
Well, now we can finally deal with the new Triptykon album. That was actually our intention 2 years ago, and we had begun working in earnest on it. But then we had to shelve the idea because of the whole Requiem thing. But now that it's being released, we can focus this year on doing the new Triptykon album and doing some other projects. Finally, I feel that I'm freed again creatively. You definitely want to finish the new studio album within reasonable time this year.
Do you give yourself a release date when you're working on something like this, or do you just kind of let it come naturally?
Well, of course you have some idealistic timeline in your head, and I mean, I'm not talking about the date, but maybe some time frame, spring or something like that. But very often, if you write your music not according to a record company schedule and pressure by management and so on, if you write your music actually because of the music, and you have full control over your career, then it slips sometimes because the music rules. And if a song is not finished, or if there's a better song that still needs work, or if a song changes massively during the recording, you take that time. And you don't bow to commercial pressures, and we have the luxury to be in that situation. We record with our own label and so on. We have a licensing deal with Central Media Sony, but we have full control, and the album is finished when we decide it's finished. I want to finish the album this year, and it's probably going to be too late to release it, but I'm sure we're going to release maybe a single or an EP or something towards the end of the year, and the album should come out next year.
That's exciting. Do you have an idea about how you want it to sound already?
Thing is, I had my wildly experimental time.
Yes.
For a very long time. Celtic Frost, every album was wildly experimental, completely different from the one before, and I needed to do that. But I've done this in my life, and I don't have to do this with every album I do. There's this responsibility to explore music and create true art. The torch must be passed. I've done my share. Having said that, of course, every Triptykon album has material on it, from doom to thrash to black metal to electronica to jazz to classical, and so on. So it's it's still very experimental, but not as wildly experimental. So what you can expect is a typical Triptykon album, which basically means a lot, you know.
Triumph of Death, the shows have been postponed, but at least they're not canceled. When you play these Hellhammer songs live, are you trying to go for authenticity, or are you kind of recreating them in your own new style?
No, absolutely authenticity. I wouldn't dare to change anything like that. To me, these songs are sacred, and not just mine. When you look at that time that music was created, it was a very magical time in our scene.
Yeah.
There was a lot of releases at the time that wrote metal history, and I don't think you should tamper with those. I know there's the camp that prefers to re-record old albums because of deficient sound or whatever, and there's the school that prefers to hold it sacred. I am part of the hold it sacred school. Even if I would do a perfect version, it wouldn't be Hellhammer. It would be a sacrilege. So what we do is we try to play them as closely to the original as possible, and as to do this as faithfully also to the spirit of the original Hellhammer.
I love that, and I couldn't agree more. So would you ever record new music in the style of Hellhammer?
We might. Well, the first thing we're going to do is we have recorded several of the shows, and we will screen that material sometime this year too. And if it's good, and I think some of the recordings are very good, we're going to release the best of it. We're going to mix it and release the best of it. That's probably live EPs or something like that. But the band has really grown, in the new lineup, the band has really grown into a family after we had to deal with some personalities that were of a con-like nature. We are now in a completely different position, and we really feel like a circle of friends, a family, and there's such a good spirit in the band that we have pondered about recording new music, but of course under the name Triumph of Death, not Hellhammer.
Yeah.
And music in the vein of Hellhammer, but release it honestly, say, look, this is not Hellhammer, but we love this kind of style, and this is our interpretation of it, and see if other people like that too. But we haven't really made a decision on that. We want to be very respectful, and we don't want to overstep certain boundaries. So we haven't made a decision about that.
You also have a new project called, is it Nirf? Is that correct?
I used to be in a project called Nearth, but me and the drummer, for the same reason that we had to dismiss one person from Triumph of Death, and those are very, very, very important reasons, crucial reasons, that there was no way around it. And for the same reasons, me and the drummer, P.D. Leuenberger, we left Nearth. But of course, we had worked for 1.5 years on that material. We had recorded it, and there again, we recorded it with my own label. We financed that, so I own that material, and it's very strong material, I believe. It's some of the best material I've ever written. And we have actually, today we had a major conference call with Nuclear Blast, and we have now a solid timeline. We're going to change the material slightly and add 3 new songs, and then release it as an album later this year.
That's amazing.
I feel very strongly about this. It's going to be a different name. We left Nearth, and we left it to that person for what it's worth. We wanted to have a clean start. We didn't want to have any bad feelings attached to it. So we formed a new band, and all the details will be made public very soon.
Do you have a name yet?
Absolutely. But let me release all of this once we there's no hurry to it. I want to do this right. We will release the name and some details about it before too long.
Well, I am looking forward to it. Really,
we would have done that. That answers your question in the beginning. We would have done this already, and we would have been in the studio already if there hadn't been a lockdown. We were supposed to have a major recording session in Germany like 1.5 months ago, and also photo session and so on. Everything had to be cancelled because everything's international, and there was no traveling. So that's the impact of COVID-19. But we have rescheduled everything. So let's see.
So you said that this is some of the strongest stuff you've worked on. How would you describe the sound?
It's very dark music, but it's not heavy metal. It's not doom metal or something like that. It's difficult to describe. It is heavy at times. It's very groovy. It's very psychedelic. Sometimes it's floating, almost like Pink Floyd. But it is very dark, very melodic, very mesmerizing, hypnotic.
Well, I'm very intrigued now. That's a great description. I'm looking forward to it. As someone who has inspired so many other bands, what advice would you give to an up-and-coming musician?
That's a very difficult question. There's so much that one would have to say to an aspiring musician. First and foremost, probably, if you want to be a professional musician and deal with the recording industry or the music industry, you have to be very, very careful. There's a million traps. There's a lot of people out to rob you of whatever you create, of whatever profits you make, of whatever goodwill you have. And it can end badly. You can end very frustrated, very disappointed. So you have to be very watchful. That's probably more important than any musical advice. And the second thing is be original. Talent to me is not technical affinity on your instrument. As a matter of fact, I'm getting quite tired with all these bands trying to top each other like it's an Olympic discipline by, who can be more technical. And they forget the groove, they forget the feeling, they forget the emotion in their music. So to me, talent is to be original and to bring across an image, a musical image, a picture, an atmosphere, emotions, true emotions, real emotions, rather than to try to show on the guitar how good you are. That's such a macho testosterone game. It's tiring.
And Tom, my last question for you is there anything you would like to say to your fans?
Well, of course. I've been granted to be a musician for 39 years now. And it was the dream of the young Tom and teenage Tom to be a musician. And of course, it seemed totally far-fetched for somebody out of a tiny farm village in Switzerland. And Switzerland didn't have a scene and so on at the time. It seemed completely far-fetched. And that it has become a reality. I own all of this to my audience, who has given my music a chance and who has been listening to my ideas, for better or for worse. And they're still with me, and they have enabled me to live my dream, and I owe them enormous gratitude, and there's not a second in my life that I forget this.
Tom, thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure, and thank you for your time and your interest.